Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. Hello dear friends from Kardec Radio, and welcome back to another chapter of the messengers in our home. Tonight we're going to talk about chapter 9, listening to impressions. Hello Mackenzie.
Hi Francisca, and hello everyone. Welcome back to another chapter of the messengers in our home. Thanks for listening.
So before we start, we'll do a prayer to attune to God. So if you can, close your eyes and elevate your thoughts to the higher spheres. Dear Mother, Father God, Creator of the universe and of our yet small hearts, we thank you so much for all the blessings we receive in our lives every day, and especially the ones we don't see as such immediately. We thank you for the opportunities to learn and to grow, and especially to learn to love our brothers and sisters of our universal family each day a little bit more. We are grateful for the examples in the book The Messengers, from which we will learn today, for all the lessons, the experiences that help us bring awareness into our lives and gives us an opportunity to make changes if necessary. We would like to thank the good spirits of Kardec Radio for their constant support and inspiration, and we would like to ask them to help us open our hearts and minds as we're listening to tonight's program, so that the letters in the book we're talking about become alive in our hearts, and we are able to put the teachings into practice in our daily lives. And with your permission, we would like to start our meeting. So be it.
Chapter 9. Listening to Impressions. Allowing Asselino to converse in private with Ottavio, Vicente led me to another part of the room. Several groups were engaged in interesting and instructive conversation. I noticed that nearly everyone was talking about the defeats they had suffered on Earth.
I did as much as I could,
exclaimed a kindly elderly lady to two of her friends who were listening attentively.
But family ties are just too strong. I kept hearing something within my mind, a loud voice trying to make itself heard, compelling me to do what I was supposed to do. But what about my husband? Amancio never accepted it. If sick persons came to me in need of an ordinary receituario, his bad mood would get even worse. If friends in the faith invited me to a spiritual study session, he would throw a fit of jealousy. Would you believe he even went so far as to turn my own daughters against me? How could I have possibly attended to my mediumistic obligations under such circumstances? Nevertheless,
stated one of the women who seemed more self-assured,
we always find the means and pretext to turn our backs on guilt. Let's take a realistic look at our problems. You'll have to agree that with the help of a strong will, one can always find a few minutes and a few small opportunities during the week to do good. Perhaps you could have won the understanding of your husband and the loving cooperation of your daughters if you had worked in silence, thereby demonstrating your sincere willingness to make a sacrifice. Our acts, Mariana, are much more contagious than our words. Yes,
answered Mariana in a different tone of voice.
I agree with what you are saying. The truth of the matter is that I was never able to bear my family's lack of understanding without complaining about it. For us to work effectively,
replied her friend judiciously,
we need to be able to keep quiet more than anything else. We would have fulfilled our duties perfectly if we ourselves had followed all the guidelines for obedience and optimism that we offer to others. Giving advice is always useful, but giving too much of it can make us forget our obligations. I say this because my case, I must admit, is a lot like yours. We went to the physical realm to grow in Jesus, but we fell into the foolishness of believing that we were there to argue about things that really didn't matter. I didn't perform my duty as a medium because of my overpowering annoyance with respect to my family's indifference towards spiritual work. Our instructors here had advised me beforehand that in order to teach well, it is necessary to set a good example. Unfortunately for me, I forgot all about that during my work on earth. If my husband presented arguments against my spiritual work, I refuted them. I couldn't stand any opinion contrary to my own in matters of faith, and I was incapable of perceiving the vanity and foolishness of my attitudes. Because of my thoughtlessness, I suffered my final loss, during which I greatly exasperated my responsibilities. Joachim and I fought almost every month, and we exchanged not only hurtful insults, but poisonous fluids secreted by our rebellious and sickly minds. Amidst these conflicts and their consequences, I wasted my time and was unable to do any spiritually constructive work at all.
Just then, Vicente got my attention to introduce me to a friend. Nearby, another group of women was engaged in lively conversation.
So, Ernestina,
one of them asked the youngest one,
what was the cause of your misfortune? Simply put, fear, my friend,
explained Ernestina.
I was afraid of everything and everyone. It was my greatest fault. Now that's surprising. You were very well prepared. I still remember our lessons together. The instructors from elucidation had a lot of confidence in your competence. Your learning ability set the standard for the rest of us. Yes, my dear Benita, but your memories make me feel more pointedly the extent of my spiritual impoverishment. But I can't hide from the truth. I myself was to blame for everything. I had prepared myself well enough to pay off old debts and learn new things. But I was not as careful as I should have been. The call to service chimed at the right time and guided my thought processes to greater enlightenment. Our instructors offered me the holiest incentives. But I distrusted other people, discarnates and even myself. In my instructors on the physical plane, I saw only dishonest people. In my invisible brothers and sisters, I believed I would only find deceivers dressed up as guides. And in myself, I feared baneful tendencies. A lot of my friends thought of me as virtuous because of the strictness of my demands. Nevertheless, deep down, I was nothing more than a sickly volunteer, burdened with needless afflictions. That was very immature of you,
retorted the other.
You forgot that in the carnal sphere, the greatest interest of the soul is the accomplishment of something useful for the good of all, something that will last for all eternity. In such an occupation, it is crucial to realize that there will be harassment from all sorts of rival elements. The ironies of ignorance, bouts of reasonableness, and the menial suggestions of our own animalistic nature will undoubtedly appear on the path of every faithful worker. These are the logical and unavoidable circumstances of our spiritual work. We do not go to the physical world to take an unwarranted break. but to struggle for our improvement in spite of every unforeseen obstacle. I get that now,
said the other.
The fear of deception jeopardized a wonderful opportunity. Ah, my friend,
replied Benita.
It's too late for regrets. We are so afraid of being deceived that we end up deceiving the services of Christ.
I was listening to their conversation with growing interest, but my companion led me away to introduce me to new acquaintances. I was attentive to these pleasant tasks of No Solar Society, but so that I wouldn't lose out on an opportunity to learn, I continued eavesdropping on the conversations around me. A few gentlemen were carrying on a discreet exchange of opinions. I know that I failed, said one of them in a serious tone, and I have already expiated a great deal in the lower regions. Now I'm waiting for Providence to give me another chance. Do you think you lacked sufficient guidance? Asked another friend. I'll explain, clarified the first. I lacked support from my wife. With her at my side, I felt a profound equilibrium in my psychic energies. I can't explain it, but her company compensated for all my expenditures of mediumistic energy. My sense of balance was in the hands of my dear Adelia. I forgot, though, that a good servant must be prepared to serve the Lord in any circumstance. I hadn't learned the science of compliance, nor had I resigned myself to traveling the human road alone. When death took my devoted wife from me, I became afraid because I felt unbalanced. I wrongly tried to replace her and was harmed. My second wife had a very strong connection to maleficent spirits, and in her derangement she drew me into sexual perversions of which I never suspected myself capable. I unfeelingly went back to fraternizing with perverse people. Having started well, I ended badly. My misfortunes were enormous. However, now that I realize my shortcomings, I understand that, even in the future, it will be very difficult for me to prevail without my beloved first wife. The conversation had become extremely interesting. I wanted to follow its progress, but Vicente called my attention to another matter, and I had to join him. Translator's note. The receituário is the practice in some Brazilian spiritist centers of prescribing psychographed homeopathic or herbal medicines through special mediums called receitistas. People come in, write down the name and address of the person or themselves, and the requests are then passed on to these mediums, who then psychograph, at the command of the good spirits in charge, the appropriate medicine for each case. This week, we're talking about Chapter 9, Listening to Impressions. And as you already heard, the chapter today is not just one person talking about his own mistakes or her own mistakes in the past 2 or 3 chapters, where we had Otávio, Vicente, discussing with Andrés some pieces of those cases, where we had Acelino and so on. So this chapter today, we are going to hear about a few different spirits who themselves were on Earth, and they will explain why they failed on their missions, on their tasks on Earth. Once again, as we've been talking about this in the past few weeks, these spirits here, since they failed, they're representing ourselves in the terms of we can clearly relate to some of the difficulties, of the problems that they're going through or that they were going through when they were incarnated. So it is very interesting, very, very interesting for us to really try to understand them. I know that maybe we can it can be easier for us to understand these spirits because we can see sometimes in some of their conversations ourselves due to our own problems, our own difficulties, the situations that they are involved in and that we are also involved in our daily lives. But it is really, really important that we don't look at these spirits as other people. Because, as I say sometimes, when we say, do unto others, right, and remembering what Jesus taught us about this, so do unto others what you would want them to do unto you. So, for me, you that are listening to this program right now, you are the other to me, or one of the others to me. But I, myself, am one of the others to you. So I am other. So you are other too. So when we see these spirits in telling their stories or bits and pieces of their stories and explaining why they failed, where they failed, and when they failed, we should really try to see ourselves. Maybe not that or back when we were probably in a different incarnation, but as we are right now, facing our daily struggles, facing our problems. Because if we don't really, really try to put ourselves in their shoes, these teachings will look far-fetched from our religion, will look far-fetched from where we are right now, and we will tend to see them just as a mere lesson of morals or somebody trying to tell me something so that I can do. No, but if I can feel the pain or the hardship that these spirits are going through, being compassionate towards these stories, and more specifically remembering that these stories, to the best that we know, are real stories, as told by André Lewis, but he is telling stories of spirits who were discarnated and had lived or were incarnated at the time of the stories that they are telling us. So it is very, very important, and maybe you heard me saying this over and over again, but I find this to be so, so important while reading these books, especially these books of the series Living in the Spiritual Realm by André Lewis, but not only these, the books of any book that has and contains stories that are supposed to make us reflect upon our lives. So we really should strive to take these lessons, to take these stories to our hearts so that we can really feel and try to understand what they did compared to what we are doing and saying, am I going the path that Jesus taught me how to? Am I doing differently? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? Correct? So it is important for us also to recognize in ourselves that although we have some weaknesses, we also have some strengths. And we need to focus on our strengths to turn ourselves even stronger than what we are in those strengths, but also to look at our weaknesses and say, okay, I can improve these. I can be stronger in these weaknesses too. So make ourselves, instead of going weaker and weaker in these situations, but to improve on those and say, oh, I was weaker when I was younger on this side, maybe losing a lot of patience, or I don't know, I can't stand that person, or my family is too hard on me, they talk too much and they don't allow me to have time to do this or that, and so on and so forth. So how can I deal with this? And in this chapter, we're going to have stories of a few different spirits with who failed while incarnated in what they chose to do before incarnated. This is something else that I'd like to talk a little bit before going into these cases here of this chapter 9, is that in the situations of these spirits and in the situations of our own lives, of our personal lives, we can clearly recognize today, since we are here listening to this and really trying and struggling to learn more about Spiritism, to learn more about ourselves, it is very clear to me that we were able, if not to choose every single thing that would happen in our lives, to at least be aware of what were these choices before coming here. As we already heard Otavio say, as we already heard Acelino say, and so many other spirits, as Laura said, or were able to know before coming back on Earth when we studied the book No Solar. So we are probably amongst those spirits who had at least a chance to talk it over with the spirit guides who were surrounding us and preparing our reincarnation to say, hey, these are the major things in your life. These are the things that you need to accomplish. And as with all spirits, it will not be easy. You'll face difficulties like everybody that's reincarnated. And these are the things that you need to do. So it is very important for us to look at these spirits here in chapter 9, chapter 8, 7, and so on, as if they were ourselves, as if we knew what would happen in our lives and that we would face hardships like the ones that we are facing right now. And what are these? Naturally, this is a reflection for each and every single one of us personally. So we need to take a look at our lives and see, am I going well in dealing with this? Am I not doing so good? What do I need to do to change? And in this chapter, we will see people that had their hardships and weren't able to fulfill the whole thing, or the whole 9 yards, go the whole 9 yards to really finish what they needed to finish. And hopefully we are going on the path to, if not to finish everything, but at least to really, really struggle to and put the biggest effort, or our best efforts to complete what we started and what we decided that we would do once we were incarnated. So Andre, going to the text now, after this brief introduction here, Andre is led by Vicente to another part of the room after the conversation that they had with Acelino, and they left Acelino and Otavio talking together. And then in this other part of the room, Andre sees that there are lots of groups talking about their lives and having interesting and instructive conversation. And nearly everyone, Andre says, they were talking about the defeats they had suffered on Earth. And naturally, that's what the introduction that I just made was about, that the spirits who are going to be presented here, they're going to tell us, or they are talking among them, but since once we know their stories, we will know why they failed, right? Why they were defeated by their own mistakes, by their own weaknesses. And so the first case, there are these two ladies, they are talking, and one of them starts by saying that she did as much as she could. And this is one of the main topics here, is at least to what I can see, because we can see this happening in our lives quite frequently. We hear people saying all the time, oh, this is the best that I can do. Oh, I did what I could. This is actually, I can't do it better. I can't go further. And I always think that once we say that, we limit ourselves. And maybe that's one of our bigger problems. There is a saying, I'm not sure if the saying is in Portuguese or if it were in English that I heard it first, but I have it in my mind saying he didn't know it was impossible. So he went there and turned it into reality. And there are quite a few stories about this, right? There's a story that I heard lately about this mathematician who were in class, got there late, and were able to see in the chalkboard a equation that the teacher, the professor, left there, and he didn't catch what the professor was telling everybody, was telling the class, and so he took note on that equation and took that equation as if he needed to solve that equation. So he spent a few weeks trying to solve that equation, and a few weeks later he came back to the class and presented the solution to the teacher. And the teacher couldn't believe that, because that equation, and this is at least what I heard, a true story, that equation was one of the problems in mathematics that was not solved yet up to that moment. And that's why the equation was there. The teacher was explaining to the students that nobody was ever able to solve that problem. And because he didn't know that, he tried so hard that he was able to go there and solve it. So differently than the other students in class that maybe because they knew that it was very hard to do, they just decided that was too hard for them to even try, and maybe some of them tried, but thinking that it was very hard, they weren't able to go through and persevere enough to go and finalize that and find the solution to that equation. The other one that didn't know went there and did it. He didn't know it was impossible. He went after it and was able to make it go through. So once this lady starts by saying that she did as much as she could, it is almost as if we are saying to ourselves, oh, I can't do this. I won't be able to do this. And if I start by telling myself that I can't do it, it is very natural that I will not be able to do it, because I'm already saying it to myself. I'm already self-affirming it. And instead of rephrasing it and saying, it may be hard, but I will give a really hard try. I will push it really hard on myself to really try to do it. And the excuse that she uses by saying that she did as much as she could is complaining about the family. But family ties are just too strong. So this lady was talking to two other women, and she's saying that their family was the problem, because within herself she listened to some voices trying to compel her to do what she was supposed to do, with regards to what we were talking before, that she probably had planned to do this, to have this task in the Spiritist Center that she was going to. But the problem was the family, and is never ourselves, right? The problem is always outside of ourselves. It's our family, it's our boss, it's my colleague, it's my friend, but the problem is never myself. The problem is always on the exterior side. What about my husband, she asks herself, right? Amancio never accepted her duties. If sick people came to her in need of an ordinary receituário, which is, and there's a translator's note at the end of this chapter, receituário is a traditional form of assistance to people that come to a Spiritist center. Not all Spiritist centers have this. So there's a medium that receives the name of the person and the the address of the person, and the person will be at that address at the time where the message is being received. So there will come a spirit who will visit that person at that very moment, come back to the medium and write a note for that person, or a homeopathic medicine or a herbal medicine to help that person with the problem that she or he is having at that time. So she was one of those mediums. But once she needed to do that, the husband was always complaining about it. If friends, and she goes on, invited her to a spiritist session, to a spiritist study session, he would be very jealous of the friends. And she continues, would you believe that her husband even went so far as to turn her own daughters against herself? And she asks, how could she have possibly attended to her mediumistic obligations under these circumstances? So what could she do if her family was against her at all times? This is a very fair question, and it is a question that we all face these days, right? Basically, every single one of us have families. If not the family that we take care of, but the family that's above us in terms of responsibility. So, meaning that if I am a daughter or a son that doesn't have a job yet, and I live in the house of my parents, they have some saying on my life to some degree, right? And I have responsibilities, and the other way around too, right? If I have a husband or if I have a wife and I have kids, what are the struggles that I have to go through with them so that I can not only take care of them and take care also of the duties that I have on the Spiritist Center, right? So how could she have possibly attended his or her, in this case, mediumistic obligations under these circumstances? Like I said, this is a very fair question. It is a question that we really need to think about and to see how much am I willing to go to really perform my obligations, and dividing the time, dividing the attention that I need to give to both of these duties, these obligations in my life. And naturally, she doesn't go out without having or receiving an answer from one of the women that she was talking to, right? And her friend starts by saying, nevertheless, or in spite of what you just said, we always find the means and pretext to turn our backs on guilt. And I would, in this case here, just to make it clearer, exchange this word guilt for responsibility, so that we can clearly see that what this friend is trying to tell her and trying to tell us is that sometimes we use this excuse of what the others are doing so that we, once we fail on our task, we can find another person or another situation guilty of me not being able to finish what I was supposed to finish. And with this, she says, her friend says, let's take a realistic look at our problems. And this is also very interesting because I keep repeating myself, but I think this is very important. These are not their problems. These are our problems. Even I myself, who am talking right now to you, this is not your problem. These are our problems because we are all, as I said in, I think last week, we are all on the same boat, right? We are living on earth at the same time and fighting our struggles with our families, with our personal problems. So it's our problem. Right. So, and let's take a realistic look at these. You will have to agree, she says, and probably here this lady is talking to us. You will have to agree that with the help of a strong will, one can always find a few minutes and a few small opportunities during the week to do good. So, this is one great advice here. We should not start looking our life, to our entire life, as a place to do good. But we should strive to see small bits of our lives when we can look back and say, will I do some good next week? Right? I will do something better next week. I have a few minutes every week to do something. Why don't I use those few minutes, those opportunities to do good on those small pieces of time, on those small pieces of the day to do something useful? Because I have those minutes to do something, and if I don't do it, I lost those minutes, and then it may be hard for me to find other minutes, different minutes in another day to do what I need to do. And she advises more specifically, right? This advice here, opportunities during the week to do good, is a general for all of us, right? And then she speaks specifically to the case of her friend. Perhaps you could have won the understanding of your husband and the loving cooperation of your daughters if you had worked in silence, demonstrating your sincere willingness to make a sacrifice. Once we are willing to sacrifice some of our times to do something for the others, we will show our surroundings, we will show those who are seeing us that we are willing to sacrifice even the moments of having fun to do something for the other. In her case, we're not saying that we shouldn't have fun. We're not saying that we shouldn't have time to rest. No, we keep repeating. It's not about not doing something. It's about doing something, right? I'm not going to leave something undone to do something else. No, I have to start to try to really hard to make an effort to really balance out things, right? Balance our lives, balance our duties. If you have worked in silence, she says, right? Instead of complaining, instead of saying something back to their family, saying, oh, you complain too much, you talk too much, you say this too much to me, and then saying, oh, you don't allow me to do this. So it's not about talking back. It's about acting forward, right? Our acts, Mariana, she says, right, are much more contagious than our words. So instead of complaining back, instead of talking back, acting silently forward. And Mariana, now reflecting upon what was just said to her and speaking in a different tone of voice, as Andres says here. Yes, I agree with what you are saying. The truth of the matter is that I was never able to bear my family's lack of understanding without complaining about it. So she was actively talking back, complaining about the situation. And once we start doing this, then what will I generate once I keep complaining about my life to the ones who are doing stuff to me? I will not generate sympathy. I will not generate empathy. I will not generate trust, because apparently what I want to do is complain and not give credit or not showing my family, in her case here, that I am trying, I am making an effort to balance things out and to say to them, look, I know my family is important and I care about you a lot and I do a lot, but I also care about this side of my life that I need to fulfill these duties. I have a strong call to help other people, and this is how I have to help, and this is how I can help, and I also need to do this. But you don't need to say this out loud, although this is very important, and it would be very important to be said, right? Look, my family is important. This work here is important. I will take care of my family, but I also need to take care of this. What time do I have to do this so that I don't bother you that much? How much time would it be comfortable for us to have these balanced out? And I can sacrifice some things and stop the complaining. So we, in a minute, in 2 minutes, as we've been talking about this here, it may sound easy, and naturally it is not easy. These conversations don't happen only once. they need to happen a few times so that everybody understand that they are in the same boat, trying to go to the same place. But these are the types of conversations that are very, very necessary. But coming back to the text, complaining about it doesn't help, right? We need to find a way to convey this message, to convey this idea that she wants, that this activity is very important to her, but not saying it in a way of complaining that, oh, you are not helping me, you're just giving me a hard time, and so on and so forth, right? And the friend comes back and gives us a few more explanations about it and a few more things for us to really think about. For us to work effectively, we need to be able to keep quiet more than anything else. She just mentioned complaining, and her friend is saying, yeah, we need to do our work and be able to be quiet, just do our work silently, without complaining, just doing and performing the duty that we need to do. We would have fulfilled our duties perfectly if we ourselves had followed all the guidelines for obedience and optimism that we offered to others. And maybe she knows a little bit more about her friend's story, about Mariana's story here, probably saying to her, look, you knew a lot about Spiritism. You probably used to talk a lot about Spiritism. And were you doing what you were saying? And this is a call to us here at Kardec Radio, specifically at this moment to me, Mackenzie, because there's that very ancient saying, right? Do as I say, don't do as I do. Because I give so many advices, or we explain so much here, we try to go deeper in these texts. And the question is to me, and to ourselves who are giving advice to others, am I doing what I am advising, right? And that's what she's asking us to think about here. She goes on and says, giving advice is always useful, but giving too much of it can make us forget our obligations. And when I read this again and I took a note, I remembered a saying or a sentence from Bezerra de Menezes, which was a president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation a while ago in the 1800s, at the end of the 1800s, and that gave us a lot of messages psychographed through Chico Xavier and also through the medium from Bahia in Brazil, Divaldo Franco. There's a saying in one of his messages that he says something more or less to this idea when he says that when we discuss too much about charity, help is always late. So what does he want us to mean with this? Is that sometimes we discuss so much about the concepts, the philosophical concepts, the moral concepts, and the scientific concepts of Spiritism or of Jesus or of other religions. And we keep discussing it and talking about it. And when are we going to put these teachings into practice? This is his question, right? So charity is always late. So once we start discussing, and if in the middle of that, let's imagine this, we're discussing about love, about fraternity, about charity, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, the other person says something and I don't agree with her or with him, or the other way around. And then all of a sudden I disrespect the other person. But remember, we were just talking about love and charity. So how in the middle of a discussion about love and charity I disrespect the other person? Right? So that's what she is asking us here, right? Giving advice is always useful, but giving too much of it can make us forget our obligations. So once we discuss too much, once we complain too much, then we're wasting time in complaining and discussing instead of going and doing something, right? Forgetting our obligations, forgetting our duties. And she explains that she's saying this because her case, she needs to admit, she says, is a lot like yours. So she is not here telling this as if she is one without without imperfections, right? Without having tainted her work herself, right? She says that we went to the physical realm to grow in Jesus, but we fell into the foolishness of believing that we were there to argue about things that really didn't matter. So as we say, we keep discussing the sex of the angels. Oh, are the spirits going to be male or female? Are the spirits going to be doing this or that? And then where is the practice? Where is what we really need to do to convey the message to other people, to become the message to other people, right? She didn't perform her duty as a medium because of her overpowering annoyance with respect to her family's indifference toward spiritual work. So the other family, the family of Mariana's family, was going against her. The family of this woman here is not that they're going against her, but it's just that they don't care about it. They're indifferent toward spiritual work, so they don't really care if she goes or if she doesn't go. But when the husband presented arguments against her spiritual work, she was refuting them, as what we were just saying, right? I start talking about spiritual work. I start talking about charity, about going out and doing something, and then somebody comes and refutes this work, says something that I don't agree with. Then I start going back to them, refuting their argument, and discussing and arguing. And she says that she was incapable of perceiving the vanity and foolishness of her attitudes. How much are we into this? Once our partner doesn't agree with what we are doing, with the way that we think, can't we find or struggle or strive to find a common ground in what we are doing? Can't we show to the other, not with words, with our actions, that these teachings are what support me and are what make me a better person, to have a better relationship? Because if I have a teaching that is talking about love, and I can't show this through my actions to the other person, how will that person see what I am studying and reading and going to the Spiritist Center to do? It is more of a separation of to the other person than of something that is really, really making me change, or allowing me to perceive my weaknesses and change them, and make me be a better person, to live better with my partner, with my son, with my daughter, with where I work, where I go to study every day. What is this religion, quote unquote, doing to me, if not improving myself and allowing me to have a better relationship with the other person? That's what she is saying here. She was incapable of perceiving the vanity and foolishness of her attitudes. Just refuting the arguments and fighting, arguing all the time, just show the other person that what I am doing, what I am learning, still has not synced in within ourselves. And then she finalizes talking about her thoughtlessness, saying that she suffered her final loss, during which she greatly exacerbated her responsibility. Joachim, which is her husband here, and her fought almost every month, and they exchanged not only hurtful insults, but poisonous fluids. And by being a spiritist, she would know what that would be. These poisonous fluids, these mental darts that we keep exchanging because I don't agree, and then I keep sending the other person these bad fluids, these bad mental vibrations, and receiving them back from the partner too. Because if I don't agree, and if I refute, the other person will refute them back, and then we'll be exchanging these darts, right, of poisonous fluids secreted by their rebellious and sickly minds. And in the midst of these conflicts and their consequences, she wasted her time and was unable to do any spiritually constructive work at all. So it is interesting that maybe when she was going to the Spiritist Center here, right? She doesn't specifically say that, but probably she was still going to the Spiritist Center to do her work. But once she was back, and every month they were going into these fights and these vicious conversations or vicious arguments, they were, and she's not complaining about the others specifically, because she knows and recognizes that she was the one that would be responsible for this situation. That she was, to some degree, destroying what she was trying to build in the Spiritist Center. So it is for us to remember that our work as a Spiritist, our work as a true Christian, is not to be performed when we are in the church, when we are in the temple, when we are in the Spiritist Center, but also during our lives, at every single moment of our lives. And I have to stop here and say, Mackenzie, look at yourself in a mirror. Are you doing this? Because this lesson is not for you who are listening to. It's for everybody. It's for me. It's for Fran. It's for Vanessa. It's for everyone at Kardec Radio, outside of Kardec Radio. It's for everyone that's really willing to make a change in yourself, in myself, and to help build a better world, right? To help build a better society for everybody. So it's a struggle for all of us. And then the conversation maybe was continuing, but Vicente got Andre's attention to do something else. And Andre goes and starts listening to a different conversation amongst two other friends, amongst two other women, right? And these women are Ernestina and Benita. So, Ernestina, then Benita asked her, what was the cause of your misfortune? And Ernestina says, simply put, fear, my friend. I was afraid of everything and everyone. It was my greatest fault. So, here we come back just a little bit to chapter 42 in No Solar, when we studied it previously. And on chapter 42, they were talking, in chapter 41 in No Solar, they were talking about the Second World War being starting, right? And naturally, a lot of spirits were very afraid. And the governor on chapter 42 will talk to the colony with regards to that. And once they are talking in the beginning of the chapter, Narcisa was talking to Andre, and she mentions that they have to organize for emergencies in No Solar, due to probably if there was any need of spirits coming from Earth to No Solar, or if No Solar would be able to help some of those spirits, or discarnating spirits. And Narcisa mentions that they will have courses against fear. They will have measures against fear. And Andre questions her, right, against fear. Why so? Right? And Narcisa explained to him that fear is something that is contagious. And while reading that and rereading this chapter that we are studying now on the Messengers, chapter number 9, and doing some research, if you do research by yourself, you will find that science today really discovered that psychologically fear is contagious, right? If you're afraid of something and you start spreading that fear, people around you can, I would say quote unquote here, but it's not quote unquote, it's actually, to what I was able to research, is actually real, that we can smell fear, right? We can feel fear from the other. So it's a natural response of the body, and we are able to detect that fear from other people. And it is a psychological thing, but it's also a physical thing. And once we start giving way, right, to this fear of something, and we allow this fear to grow, it will stop and immobilize us, and will make us take, if not completely, to a complete halt, to a complete stop. Sometimes it will open up in us the old instinct to violence. So it is a base response, this fear. So fear is necessary to a certain degree, right? Evolutionarily speaking here, we understand that once we are in the dark and we are not capable of perceiving everything in the dark, our senses will dilate to some degree, right? So we have a pupil dilation so that we can see more light coming in. Our heartbeats will go up so that the blood flows stronger in our veins, so that our senses are more aware of what's going on, so we can hear better, so we can smell better, for us to be prepared for something that can come. The problem is that if we keep on living on that state over and over again, we are oversensitized, and then everything will startle us. And this is very demanding of our body, and naturally, since we are not bodies, we are spirits, it will become very demanding to our spirits too, and to our psyche too. So it is something that can be very damaging to all of us. And what she says here, right, and Ernestina says that she was afraid of everything and everyone. So she allowed herself to be dominated by the fear. She was not dominating this fear, right? Using this base sensitivity to allow us to be prepared, but to study why she was having that fear and trying to overcome that fear, be it with the help of somebody, be it within herself, but looking for some ways to overcome this, to think about that situation in a different way. So that's why, for example, maybe we decided, we saw that I was afraid of the dark, then we decided to say, okay, what can we do to have some light? And then there was fire. So fire was a way of lighting up our path. So these days we have flashlights, we have, candles, we have a lot of stuff, electric light and so on, so that we can light up the dark, and then we can see what's actually happening there, so that we allow fear not to take control, and then we take control of fear. So what is our candle? What is our flashlight once I am afraid or I'm dreading something? That's what we need to look forward to. And Jesus is a very bright light in our lives. So why do we need to be afraid of these things, right? We need to be careful, but not to be afraid, and not to allow fear to interfere with our lives. And Benita is kind of surprised because, well, now that's surprising. She says, you were very well prepared. We were together. I remember our lessons. The instructors had a lot of confidence in your competence, and your learning abilities set the standards for the rest of us. So she's telling us Ernestina was a very good learner, and she was able to understand everything, and she was able probably even to help other people to understand what it was. But and then when she recognizes this, she says, yes, Benita, you're very benevolent. You're very blessed in reminding me this, and that's the meaning of the name Benita, right? But your memories make me feel more pointedly to the extent of my spiritual impoverishment. So I know all this, but I can't hide from the truth. I have to blame only myself for this. I had the opportunity. I was prepared. I knew what I needed to do. I could pay off the debts that I had from previous lives, learn new things, but I was not as careful as I should have been. And what is this careful here about? Is exactly what we were talking when we mentioned fear, because she mentioned fear, right? Is that once we have that tingly sensation, right, that I'm afraid of something, or I am, something comes up and say, hey, this now is telling you that you have a problem. So at that moment, we need to stop and say to ourselves, what am I going to do to solve that problem, right? I need to be more careful with this. I need to think about this in a different way. I need to look at this from a different perspective. So the call to service chimed at the right time, she continues, and guided her thought processes to greater enlightenment. Instructors offered her the incentives that she needed, but then she distrusted other people, discarnates, and even herself. And that's one of the big problems, right? When we don't trust others, when we don't trust even the discarnates, but worse, when I don't trust myself. And that's a big problem. So we need to understand, why don't I trust myself, right? And I need to go deep and deep to really find, okay, what can I do to trust myself? What am I learning? What am I learning that I can use to know more of myself, know where I should invest within myself, so that I can use this knowledge to trust myself, to trust how I will do things. And we all know that this is not something that's easy to do, meaning this is not something that we do. We decide today and tomorrow we will be all set. So I don't trust myself today. I decide I will trust myself starting from tomorrow, and then tomorrow I will trust myself. No, this is something that I need to set up goals to get to. So let's say I tell myself I'm going to do this task here, and I'm not able to do it now, but I will do it tomorrow. So you set up, an alarm clock so that you can be reminded of what you need to do. You organize yourself, and then you do it. So after that, and after accomplishing that, then you do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it again. That's how we build trust, right? So how can I trust another person is the same way. I set up goals, and I don't set up these huge goals. I mean, I want to go to the moon. If I can't even start by going to the top of a building, how can I go to the moon, right? So I have to start setting up goals for myself that are feasible. That's why in the previous case, when that lady was talking to Mariana, she said that we need to set up a goal for the next week. So we need to go step by step. There's no one that gets a pen, never saw a pen in his or her life, never learned how to write their own names, gets a pen, a paper, and then writes their name right there. No, we need to learn a letter, we need to learn how to see the symbols, and then all of a sudden here in among quotes, right, between quotes, in 3 years, we are writing our names, we understand it, we see our names, we see the letters, we understand what the letter is, and so on and so forth. So it's not something that can be done quickly, but it can be done, right? And that's the big point here. So maybe I don't trust, or I fear myself, I distrust other people, but I can start to build that confidence within myself, setting up goals for me and say, I can do this. It's a day-by-day decision, just as in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So I'm not going to drink today. And then when tomorrow comes, I will say again, I'm not going to drink today. So our goal is not to drink anymore, because I recognize that it is a disease. However, I'm not going to set up a goal that I cannot know it will be done, because I have to get there by walking one foot in front of the other, right? So I'm not going to drink today. Tomorrow comes, I'm not going to drink today, and so on and so forth. The same way here, if I want to build confidence within myself, I set up goals for today, and then I set up another goal for tomorrow when tomorrow comes. I can set up a big goal, right? Shoot for the moon, they say. Yeah, but we have to set up a big goal, but we have to set up small goals so that I don't overstep what I really need to accomplish right now. Otherwise, my base will not be strong enough to support myself once I get closer to the big goal. So, coming back to Ernestina, right? She goes and says, in my structures on the physical plane, she only saw dishonest people. In her invisible brothers and sisters, she believed she would only find deceivers dressed up as guides. And in herself, I feared baneful tendencies. This really is a problem of building that confidence within yourself so that we can trust others also, right? So I see in myself these baneful, these destructive tendencies. So it is easier for me, I'm not saying that it is the only way, but it is easier for me if I see deceitful tendencies in myself that when I look at other people, that's what I'm going to see on other people because I know more about that. Psychologists call this the mirroring, right, effect. So I see on others what I see in the mirror. So if I don't trust myself, how am I going to be able to trust others? So it is that to build confidence. And she goes on and says, a lot of my friends thought of me as virtuous because of the strictness of my demands. So even people outside were looking at her and seeing that she was a virtuous people. However, she was feeling, she noticed, right, that deep down, she was nothing more than a sickly volunteer burdened with needless afflictions. And that was the perception that she had of herself. I'm not saying that this is not true. If she was seeing that, maybe she had that inside of her. But the thing is, if I see that in myself, I can also see that as a problem to be solved. So if I see that I have these tendencies that are destructive, that I don't trust other people, the question is not to get stuck on that feeling and on that thought, but actually to go over it and look at those thoughts, at those feelings from a different perspective, as we said before, and asking ourselves, what can we do? What can I do to see things differently, to change that feeling that I am having right now, to change that thought? What are the teachings that I can use to modify those feelings that I have inside? It may take a psychologist for me to go to talk to. It may take an advice from a good friend. It may take good books, reading good books, looking for answers in science, looking for answers in philosophy. But I need to learn to take a different approach, because going forward, doing the same thing always and thinking that things will change, this is not something that is feasible. Because if I keep repeating the same thing, it is as if I am planting the same types of seeds and expecting to get from those seeds different fruits. So I cannot do that. And so her friend said, that was very immature of you. You forgot that in a carnal sphere, when we are incarnated, the greatest interest of the soul is the accomplishment of something useful for the good of all, something that will last for all eternity. So it is crucial to realize that there will be harassment from all sorts of rival elements. So what is she telling us here? Once we try, let's say, I have this terrain, I have this place that I bought, this real estate that I bought. It is full of herbs, full of bushes, and I want to build something there, right? What can I do to build something there if I don't remove those obstacles from there? I won't be able to build anything unless I want to build around that and leave that there. But that will be bothersome because they are bushes. They are something that I don't want to be there because there can be animals, pests, and a lot of things that I don't want there. So this harassment from all sorts of rival elements will happen when I want to do something good. And I have to face those problems and find ways to solve that. In the real estate that I just mentioned, it is to find the right tools to remove the things that are in front of me so that I can put new things there and then overcome those problems. And then her friend tells us, the ironies of ignorance, bouts of unreasonableness, and the menial suggestions of our own animalistic nature will appear on the path of every faithful worker. So every time I want to build something positive, every time I want to change myself, every time I want to enlighten myself, there will be situations that I have to face because it is as if I am cleaning up the ground of a place that where I want to build. So these are the logical, she continues, and unavoidable circumstances of our spiritual work, because we do not go to the physical world to take an unwarranted break. So we don't come back here to take a break. No, it's actually to struggle for our improvement in spite of every unforeseen obstacle. I will have obstacles. Everybody will have obstacles. Everybody has obstacles. How do I use these obstacles to overcome the problem, right? I can look at a stairwell as a problem, but also I can look at it as a way for me to get to the point where I want to go. And then I have to climb step by step, going upwards towards my goal, towards my obstacle. Sometimes they are unforeseen because I don't study much, because I don't study much of myself, so I don't see that I have that problem, that I will have to face it sometime, but I will have to face it sometime. I will have to look at it and say, hey, I didn't see this coming, but now that I am here and I still need to conquer myself, I have to go. And I have a lot of help. Jesus is on my side. My friends are on my side. My spiritual friends are on my side. And I have God above all that want me to be happy. He wants me to love above everything else. So he will always, or she will always, as some people prefer, or he, she, right? God wants us to win, wants us to reach our goals. And the other woman says, I get that now. The fear of deception jeopardizes a wonderful opportunity. So she goes back to fear and say, hey, I shouldn't have allowed fear to overcome and to conquer me. I should have struggled more and more to conquer fear, and the fear of deception, of other people deceiving me, of the spirits deceiving me. I should have studied more so that I would be more confident. I should have surrounded myself more of people that would show me that I was being deceived and showing me that, oh, see, you just noticed that the message that you received was not a good one. So you're not being deceived anymore. It's not easy anymore to deceive you because now you're already starting to pay attention. So the same for ourselves, right? We cannot regret these things. We can just look back, say, hey, did I learn with what I did? Now I need to go and do it differently from now on. When we are afraid of being deceived, and we stop right there because of the fear and the dread, we end up, as Benita, the blessed one, tells us, we end up deceiving the services of Christ. We end up not doing what we need to do to fulfill what we set up for ourselves to do with our lives. And that's where the conversation between Benita and Ernestina, and I didn't mention what Ernestina means, the name Ernestina means. The name Ernestina means one who fights, right? And apparently the name was chosen because she didn't put up the fight that she really needed to put. So she had in herself the need to go and fight. But unfortunately, she just had the fear to take control over herself instead of putting up with it and going ahead and fighting the good fight, being brave and being courageous to fight not against others, but against herself, against the fear that she was feeling for her own strength, for not having the strength, or for thinking that she didn't have the strength, and for the fear of being deceived by others, incarnated or discarnated. And then Andre was still listening to the other conversations. Vicente took him away from there to find so that they could meet other people, and they were doing what they needed to do, paying attention to the tasks that he would need to do in No Solar, but so that, and he explains this, so that he wouldn't miss any opportunity of learning from other people's mistakes and stories. He was around a lot of people, and then he was paying attention to different conversations, which is really interesting here, because so many times we take and then we listen to conversations, and then out of gossip we tend to talk bad things about other people, right? On stories that I hear, that we hear, and then we pass along, we tell the story. And what Andre is doing here, he's actually listening to this to use these stories for himself, right? To think about himself. What do I need to learn when I hear stories of other people? It is the same thing that we ask here. What am I learning when I'm reading a book? What am I learning when I'm watching a good movie, right? What am I taking? What are the lessons that I'm taking from these opportunities that I have to hear other people talk, to read a good book, to read a good story, to see, watch, listen to a good story, real stories or even fictional ones? What am I taking from that? And then he starts by telling part of their conversation again, and these now, the two previous stories were from women were talking amongst them, and now these are two friends, two men, they are talking, and one starts by saying that he knows that he failed, and that he already expiated a great deal in the lower regions. So Andre maybe relates a lot to this because, well, the conversation where the moment where he starts listening to, it's okay, I failed and I went to the Umbro already, so I'm waiting for Providence to give me another chance. And maybe that's what Andre is thinking at this very moment. He expiated a few things in the Umbro, now he's in No Solar, and he knows that he will have to reincarnate at a point, so he will wait for Providence, right? Not wait for Providence to give him another chance, just like this man is saying, and he is saying this in a very serious tone. And the other friend asked, well, do you think that you lacked sufficient guidance? And maybe that's what Andre was thinking too, right? Oh, I failed, but I didn't have sufficient guidance when I was on Earth. So this friend is asking the man, the spirit who he is talking to, do you think you lacked sufficient guidance? And the other man says, I lacked support from my wife. With her at my side, I felt a profound equilibrium in my psychic energies. I can't explain it, but her company compensated for all my expenditures of mediumistic energy. My sense of balance was in the hands of my dear Adelia. So Adelia was his wife, and Adelia means noble. So to some degree, she was this noble woman who probably had a very good spiritual background and was calm, was tranquil, and was able to provide this tranquility, this peace to him, so that he could compensate what the works that he was doing as a medium and being balanced by Adelia. So they had this exchange and this good exchange of energies, so that he was able to perform the best that he could at his work. So first thing that when I read this story it reminds me of a previous chapter that we studied, where one of those spirits, in his reincarnation plan, he was not supposed to have a wife, to marry, and to have a companion. He would have to do his work alone, because he would need to take care of those 6 spirits and perform his work with those spirits, not having a wife. And I remember saying that this is not the rule. There is nothing to do with mediumship being or not being married. Here is the opposite. See, he was married, and he feels that with her, he was more balanced. But the problem here was not that he was balanced, is that his sense of balance was in the hands of her. So he put, instead of the balance that he needed to have by himself, he put his necessity of balance in having another person by his side. And then when she died, because probably of her own needs as a spirit, he lost that balance, that sense of balance. And he says, I forgot that a good servant must be prepared to serve the Lord in any circumstance. So, although naturally I'm not going to think, oh, if my wife dies, if my husband dies, if my son dies, I don't need to think that. It's not something that I should be thinking at all times. But one of the only certainties in life is that everybody that is living will die. And it can happen at any time. So this, although it should not be in the forefront of our consciousness, we have to have that in our minds. But we also can have, and as spiritists we should have, the remembrance and to be reminded by ourselves that if the person dies, the person didn't die, right? The body stayed behind, but love never dies, and the person is still there. But unfortunately, most of the times, these are not some things that I tend to think of on a daily basis, on my day-to-day life. So he goes on. I hadn't learned the science of compliance, nor had I resigned myself to traveling the human road alone. So he didn't accept it. He was not ready mentally for it. But he knows now that he already died, that thing should have been in his mind. He should have thought of that, or he should have really learned that, because naturally, in being a spiritist, he already knew that. He already knew that could happen. Not that it would happen, but that could happen. And in his case, it happened. I was almost saying unfortunately, but I don't know if it was unfortunately, right? We all go through things that we need to go through so that we learn the lessons that we need to learn. So death, he says, took his devoted wife from him, and he became afraid. So here comes fear again, because he felt unbalanced. Now he is alone, he doesn't know what to do, and he despairs to some degree. So he wrongly tries to replace her, and then he was harmed. I need somebody else. Again, there is also nothing wrong with, if you don't have a wife because you lost a wife or because you lost a husband, to have a second husband or a second wife. There's nothing wrong with it. It will be in a case by case. It will be the necessity that I really have to have that second person in my life, or that third person, whoever it is. So in his case, he says his second wife had a very strong connection to maleficent spirits, and in her derangement, she drew him into sexual perversions of which he never suspected himself capable of doing. So he went to fraternizing with perverse people, having started well, so his life started well. He went through well up to a certain point in his life, going on with his duties and performing everything that he needed to do in the Spiritist Center in his own life. But then in the middle of the way, he just deviated from the plan because something happened, which again probably was part of the plan, so that he would learn that sometimes we need to go alone for a while. We will have to face we will have to face our demons, right, quote unquote here, alone, because nobody else can do it for me at that specific moment in time. I don't remember why, he probably was thinking. I don't know why I need to be alone now. But who knows what he did in a different life, right? And thinking about ourselves, who knows what I did in a previous life to be in a situation that I am right now. So at that moment when he felt alone, he just chose the wrong path again and ended his life badly. His misfortunes were enormous. However, now, and then he comes back to the present, now that he realizes his shortcomings, he understands that even in the future, it will be difficult, very difficult for him to prevail without his beloved first wife, because he feels that he is not capable of. Is that true? How do I feel about that? If I am in his place, do I feel the same way? What should I do to do it differently? We can go back and talk about fear again. This is fear taking over him once again. So we need to connect to those people, as we said in the beginning. Understand, have compassion towards them, so that I feel what they're feeling, and that I can, deep inside myself, ask me, what is that I'm going through right now? And can I go ahead and keep working hard on changing myself, on really following the plan that I set up for myself? Never putting an effort not to make the same mistakes that I probably did in a previous life, and sometimes even in this life, because sometimes I commit a mistake, and then after a few days, a few years, I do the same mistake, and then the same mistake, showing us that, okay, maybe we need to stop and think what I did and see, oh, I am repeating myself, committing the same mistakes over and over again. Is that what I am doing now? So I know that these past few chapters are being, and we're going to have a few more, but this is very hard on us, and I know that. But these are calls that we really need to think very carefully when we are doing these tasks in the Spiritist Center, but more than in the Spiritist Center, with ourselves, to our families. We really need to be careful, because we are not fighting against the problems outside. We are fighting against the problems inside. Mistakes that I made because I still didn't win over my old self. I still didn't become a new man or a new woman, and that's our fight. But once we have clear in our minds that Jesus is on our side, that his teachings are always providing us the guiding light for where to go, doing to others what we want others to do unto you, to really really strive to become a better person, we can be sure that there will always be good spirits on our side, good friends on our side, giving us the best advice for us to go forward and improve and improve and improve. Andre finalizes the chapter saying that the conversation had become extremely interesting, that he wanted to follow its progress, just like I wanted to follow the progress. However, Vicente called his attention to another matter, and he had to join him. And naturally, we have to join him because that was his choice. And maybe these guys were about to start entering into things that were not suited for us to listen to hear to, and what they were talking about was what was important for us to hear. And so that's where we stop today. Also, hoping that the next few chapters, where we're going to talk about the experiences of other spirits who also had problems, Joel, Bellarmino, and Montero, will find very interesting these next 3 chapters, talking about 3 different spirits in other different situations, finalizing with Vicente reflecting upon the stories of these other people, so that we can really think about the stories of these spirits as our personal stories, and hopefully learning more and more to be a better person in this life. I hope and wish that you have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.